Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to give you 10 recommendations for queer books to read during Pride Month or any month. Alright, at this point when the video is uploaded, we are a little over a week into June, but I have 10 recommendations here for books that I think you should go ahead and try out either this month or of course any month, because here on this channel we read queer books year round. Some of these books are books that I recently read and loved, and others there is a little bit of a bigger gap since I read them, and you may notice that in the fact that I only remember the general enjoyable vibes that I was experiencing while reading them. But hopefully you will find some good recommendations in this video, and of course I'm always looking for new queer books to read, so go ahead and leave your recommendations down below. All right, to avoid this video getting too long, we'll go ahead and jump right in with book number 1, and that is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. This is a book I recently finished, so if you follow my channel you may have recently seen the vlog in which this book was featured. This is a young adult story following a character called Felicity, and she attends a private girls' school called Dalloway, and she unfortunately lost her girlfriend last year, who ended up dying in somewhat suspicious circumstances. She has now returned to complete her senior year at the school, and there she meets Ellis, who is a prodigy in literature. She's already written a Pulitzer Prize novel and is there to write her next novel about the Dalloway witches, which were 5 women who were accused of being witches and killed on the school grounds. The story is steeped in witchy vibes, dark academia vibes, and pretentious girls who are obsessed with literature. Felicity and Ellis form a somewhat obsessive relationship with each other. There's definitely some sexual tension there, and eventually they do form a romantic relationship. So this book does feature a female romance. I really enjoyed the writing in this story. I thought it fit perfectly for the ambiance that the author was going for. It really brought to life kind of the eerie vibes of a school that is possibly haunted by 5 women who were killed purely for being ahead of their time. This was a story where I spent a lot of time thinking that I knew what was going to happen at the end, and then the author kind of turned everything upside down and took me by surprise. I ended up giving this story 4 stars, and I could definitely see it being even higher on a reread, especially if I read it in like a kind of cozy setting during the fall months, because this is definitely the kind of book that you want to read on a dreary, rainy day. The next book that I have is the only nonfiction on this list, and that is Ace: What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. This is one of the first books that I reviewed on my channel, and I think it's actually featured in the first vlog that I ever did. I read this book because I myself am on the Ace spectrum and just wanted to know more about word meant to society and what it could mean to me. I really enjoyed this read. I thought the author went really into depths, not just about what asexuality is in general, but what it was to her. I really enjoyed how she kind of mentioned the stumbling blocks that she herself went through and some of the misconceptions that she had about people who are on the ace spectrum. It really made the author very relatable, because a lot of the things that she thought were things that I myself may have thought as well, if she had not corrected me before I could take those opinions and solidify them. I thought that the story was very easy to read. It was very digestible. and acted as a really great entry point into learning more about asexuality. Next up, we have a book from an author that most of you probably already know, and that is TJ Klune. Now, obviously, you can read any of his books. All of them have queer representation and have different forms of queer representation in them, but I wanted to go ahead and highlight Into This River I Drown. This is the first book I ever read by this author, so it does hold a special place in my heart. This is a standalone, and we are following a young man called Benji, and a few years ago he tragically lost his father to a car accident. He's been kind of living in his small town, living day to day, very deeply immersed in his grief, working at his father's gas station and living with his mother and his 3 aunts. One day, when he is visiting the site of his father's death, he sees something fall from the sky. This ends up being the guardian angel of his small town, and this guardian angel has been keeping a close eye on Benji and feeling a lot of guilt around the fact that as a guardian angel, he let such an integral and beloved member of the society, of this community, pass away. He and Benji start to realize that his father's death may not have been an accident, and so they start to investigate. Obviously, a relationship forms between Benji and his guardian angel. The angel's name is Khalil, and he is just really excited to be in the human world. He's kind of been up on high all by himself. He doesn't interact with any of his siblings. He doesn't even really interact much with his father, who is God. This book does have a little bit more religious themes than you may see featured in other TJ Klune books, but I didn't think as an atheist that it was too overwhelming or turned me off from the story in any way. It just really allowed you to enjoy the little aspects of day-to-day life through Khalil, who has never experienced them before, and we get to kind of see Benji start to enjoy these as well. This book obviously heavily discusses the topic of grief, but TJ Klune does this very often in his books, and I think he does a really great job of it. The story is well balanced between a story of loss, a story of love, and a story of betrayal as well. There's a lot going on in this book. You got the small town vibes, you have strong family bonds, and you also have an excellent romance as well as a very interesting mystery at hand. So if you haven't checked out this TJ Klune book yet, I highly suggest you do so. All right, the next book I have is a book that you probably often see kind of peeking over my shoulder. I have a TJ Klune book in its place right now, and that is Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat. This is C.S. Pacat's introduction to YA, at least in novel format. She is doing the comic books. And I believe book 2 is coming out at some point this year. I already pre-ordered it, and you should do the same. This book, I don't know how to describe it. This is one of those books where it's been a little while since I initially read it. I'm trying to think when it came out, because I think I read it pretty close to when it first came out. So back in 2021, so it's definitely been over a year, if not close to 2 years since I read it. Pretty much we are following a young boy, 16, who is on the run from some people who killed his mother. He finds himself kind of thrown into this battle, this magical battle between dark and light. He is told that he is to fight next to the Stewards, who are a group of magical users who are trying to hold back this darkness that has tried to destroy the world in the past and is now rising again. I don't know what else to say about this. I feel like you just have to go into it. C.S. Picat's world building is incredible. I'm pretty sure she said she spent about 10 years just researching and traveling and building this world, and you can very much see that when you're reading. She's very good with her attention to detail, and it's just she brings this whole world and this whole war to life. I will say this is a little bit of an intro. This is the first in a series, so you're definitely spending a lot of time getting a lot of information and whatnot shoved at you, just like our poor character is experiencing as well. But yet at the same time, there's definitely enough action to keep the plot moving forward, and at no point do you feel like you're slugging through a big info dump or anything like that. As usual, C.S. Picat does have a lot of queer vibes going on in her story. There's a character, I want to say his name is James, but I may be hallucinating, and James seems to be acting as a mouthpiece for the dark, and he is hunting down Will, yet at the same time he seems very drawn to Will as well, and as the story goes on we start to see the reason for that. So I definitely need to reread this book before I get to book 2, but since book 2 is coming out sometime this year, now is the perfect time for you to pick up book 1. The next book I want to talk about is Someday by Emma Scott. This is a male-male romance that I'm 90% sure is on Kindle Unlimited. In this book, we are following Max, and he is a recovering drug addict, and he has recently put himself through nursing school and has been taken on as a private nurse for a very wealthy man. One day, that wealthy man's son shows up, and he recognizes him from one of their meetings that they go to for drug recovery, and the son kind of approaches him thinking that he is there to blackmail him about his drug addiction. And Max is like, bruh, I'm just here to do a job, okay? I didn't know you were like a millionaire. The more time Max spends here, the more he starts to see that things aren't so good with this family's company, specifically since they work in pharmaceuticals. So you can kind of guess where this goes, considering the whole opioid epidemic kind of situation. He and this man's son start to form a closer bond as they start to right some of the wrongs. Oftentimes when it comes to a romance, I do enjoy a little bit of drama, a little bit of sadness and hardship tied into all the romantic aspects of it. It just escalates all the feelings in the story, and this book definitely did that. I also enjoyed that our rich man, whose name I'm forgetting, had a brother who has autism, and he is very close with this brother, so I really enjoyed that aspect of the story as well, especially since this man's father is a-hole to his older son because of his autism. So obviously there's going to be some trigger warnings in this story about mistreatment of people with autism as well as homophobia, since our rich man needs to hide the fact that he has feelings for men in order to one day inherit the company. I do remember not being totally in love with the smut scenes, but emotion-wise, this book gave me exactly what I wanted. So if you're looking for a more emotional yet heartwarming story. This is definitely one that you should check out, but since it does deal with drug addiction, please make sure to check out some trigger warnings before starting. All right, the next book that I want to recommend, I actually want to recommend the entire trilogy, so check it out. And that is The Last Son by K.D. Edwards. This is a queer urban fantasy story. We are following Rune, who is an arcana, and this is someone who is a descendant of someone from Atlantis. Atlantis was destroyed a while ago, 100 years or so ago, and they have now moved to New Atlantis, where they are ruled over by a group of people who are inspired by the tarot cards, or rather, in this case, the tarot cards were inspired by them. These are people with incredible amounts of power and also have access to practically immortality. Rune is the last member of the Sun Court, which was destroyed a decade ago. A lot of this story revolves around the mystery of why his court was destroyed and why he was kept alive. We follow him and his companion Brand as they look into this, as well as other conspiracies, and kind of build this found family around themselves. Since their court was destroyed at the beginning of the series, it's just the two of them, but throughout this trilogy, more and more people start gravitating towards them, and Rune is just like, okay, I'm your dad now, and I'm your dad as well. And so if you love books with found family aspects, this is definitely perfect. As I said, it has queer vibes. Rune is gay, and there is a male-male relationship in here, and we also have other queer side characters. One of the things I really loved about this was the world building and the magic system. As you go through the story, Rune learns more about his magical abilities, and so you gradually get to learn more about this magic system that just seems to be more and more impressive with every book that you read. Overall, this is just a really fun and exciting urban fantasy with lots of political drama, lots of powerful and corrupt villains, and lots of loving and quirky allies. All right, my next book is a YA contemporary, and this is called Birthday by Meredith Russo. This is a book that features a trans main character. The author is also trans, so it is own voices. In this book, we are following best friends Eric and Morgan. They were born at the same time in the same hospital, and I believe there was like a snowstorm, so their families ended up just kind of connecting at that time, and the two of them have been friends ever since. However, at the beginning of this book, their relationship has definitely started to drift apart. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Morgan's mother passed away. Morgan is not only struggling with the grief of losing their mother, but at the fact that they identify as female despite biologically being male. They are living in a small town that does not accept queerness, let alone transness, and so they are suffering very heavily with mental illness issues because they are not able to live as their true self. We follow the two of them as they kind of go through, I believe it's their senior year, and Eric is trying to figure out what's going on with Morgan, and Morgan is trying to pretend to be normal and is just spiraling out of control because of this. The story obviously has a happy ending in where Morgan and Eric form a relationship formed on acceptance and trust, and Morgan is able to live as the person that they truly are. This book really took me by surprise. I feel like it's slightly older, and so I thought that I wouldn't like it. It came out in 2019, so I guess it's not that old, but I read it when I was definitely moving away from YA a little bit more, but I absolutely loved how heartbreaking the story is, not because I enjoy watching people suffer, but just because it really made me feel something. I thought it was a really great window into the life of a trans person within a small homophobic community. Obviously, all experiences for individuals are different, but I think this gives you a good glimpse of just how difficult it can be and how important gender affirming care can be for someone's mental health. So if you're looking for a moving yet heartwarming story about a young trans girl, I highly recommend Birthday. All right, guys, and our second to last book, we have Iron Widow by Sharon J. Shao. This is a sci-fi story that's following a young woman called Shitan, and her sister was recently killed in this war that they are fighting against these aliens that invaded their planet many years ago. Their army uses these machines called chrysalists, and they are giant robots that are powered by chi, using yin and yang, a male and a female. In the society, women are seen as lesser beings, and so women are placed with men who have stronger chi, meaning that when they go into the machine together, the women end up dying, which is what happens to her sister. Seeking revenge, our character volunteers to join this battle and ends up being partnered with the man that was responsible for her sister's death. She ends up surviving this encounter, and in fact, not only surviving it, but killing him, making her an Iron Widow. Instead of praising her prowess on the battlefield, they place her with the most powerful member of the military and hoping that he can overpower her and kill her in the next battle. Instead, they find that the two of them are quite compatible, and so they set off not only to battle these machines, but the misogyny within the military and this country. This book has a polyamorous relationship between our main character, her flight partner, and her best friend. The relationship isn't overly prominent in this book. I'm assuming that it'll be more prominent in the second book, since it was just starting to develop here. Yet at the same time, I really enjoyed the relationship between the three of them and really enjoyed the political aspects of this book as well. If you're looking for a book with strong feminist themes, this is definitely the book for you. As for the ending, it was definitely a huge shock to me, and I was definitely bummed that the second book is getting pushed, I think, into 2024. I'm very eager to continue the story to see where it leads. All right, and we have the last book on this list. If I'm being honest, if you only read one book on this list, I'm asking that it be this book. It's a book I just recently finished reading and absolutely emotionally destroyed me. And that is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. And this is an author that I've been meaning to check out for a long time. And I'm kicking myself that I waited this long. I mean, I could have been reading their books all these years, and I just feel like I've been missing out. But in this book, we are following multiple characters. We have Vivek, who is a young man in a Nigerian, I believe they mentioned once that it was Nigeria, a Nigerian village. And he has always been a little different. He seems to kind of suffer from these trances that kind of cause him to blank out for a while and not really understand or not really have any control over what he's doing. And as he grows older, he seems to have a bit of a secret life going on behind his parents' back. We are also following multiple other characters, both before and after his death. This entire story kind of explores people's relationship with Vivek and just the impact that he had on their life. This is a short book, yet every single character that was introduced was so well formed. There were multiple kind of plot lines that all merged in a crescendo, and it was all really well done. There was a little bit of a mystery aspect because Vivek's mother is trying to figure out why he was killed. Pretty much she opened the door one day and found her son laid out on the front porch with the back of his skull cracked open, which is obviously a very traumatic event for a mother, and she is set on figuring out why someone would do this to her son. This story, I don't want to really go into depth about what kind of queer representation it has, since that is part of the mystery aspect of this. The story has some great messaging in it about the dangers of being a certain type of person and how that can hurt you, and not just through people that want to harm you, but by people who want to protect you. This story was incredibly emotional. The entire time I was reading it, I almost always felt like I was on the verge of tears. And when I finished the second to last chapter and flipped to the last chapter and saw who was narrating it, I just broke down, you know? And the other day I was trying to check how many pages were in this book so that I could put it in my spreadsheet, and I just decided to idiotically read that last chapter again, and so I just had to sit there and cry again because it's so heartbreaking. This story will kind of change you in a way. It's one of those stories where you kind of realize that the death of a character is going to leave you grieving for a while. You will feel like you experienced a personal death in your life. That is how well Akwaeke Emezi wrote this character through the eyes of others as well as through Vivek's eyes. Please read this. Please read this if you have not read this book yet. It is so short. It is so beautiful. The writing is incredible. The characters are so alive, and the story, it really is kind of a life-changing story that you will want to revisit again and again throughout your own life. All right, so these are the 10 books as well as The Darkness Outside Us and Someday that I recommend that you pick up. These all have great queer representation in them and overall are just incredible stories. As I mentioned, please leave your recommendation for queer stories down below. I would love to check them out. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!